What's up, Real Life Nation? Welcome back for what for some of you is the most exciting series that we do all year, and for others, it's the most awkward series we do all year. It's Waiting, Dating, and Mating, y'all! Yeah! This is a series where we talk about sex, we talk about dating, we talk about porn, we talk about masturbation, we talk about relationships. We get it all out there and we talk about it because everyone's talking about it, right? I mean, movies and TV shows portray it, songs sing about it, news outlets write about it, social media advertises it, pornography acts it out, and you may or may not know this, but God has something to say about sex as well. And I know what some of you are already thinking. You already know what God has to say about sex, and it goes a little something like this.
What if I want to have sex before I get married?
Well, I guess you just have to be prepared to die. And you'll probably take with you your spouse and one or more of your children.
For how many of you is that the Christian view of sex? Be prepared to die. When I was in high school as a young Christian, I know I heard specific messages about sex from the church. I heard it's dirty, it's wrong, it's sinful, don't do it or you'll get chlamydia and die. But when you're married, it's all good, yay! What a horrible lesson that you can hear from the church. The church should be a place where sex is honored as something beautiful that God created. And that is how I want this series about sex to be different for you than it was for me when I was your age. I want these messages that you hear about sex that come from the Bible or from the church, the Christian church, to be honest, to be loving, and to be hopeful for you. And as we get into this, I know there's going to be parts of this conversation where you may disagree with what I say, you may disagree with what the Bible says about sex, and that's fine. I'm glad you're here. But whether you're a Christian or not, and whether you agree with me or not, I hope that what you hear throughout the course of this series, that you understand that I'm teaching you from a place where I truly care about you. I truly want you to make great decisions for your life. I want this area of your life to be something that isn't a problem, isn't something that brings you sadness or frustration, something that brings you joy, something that brings you hope. And I hope that's something that you also understand that God, the God that I'm talking about, the God whose principles I'm trying to convey today, is somebody who cares about you as well. So I hope I have your attention for the next few weeks as we explore this topic. And as we get started, I want you to reflect on something for me for just a moment, all right? Reflect on this question. What messages have you heard about sex? Really think about that, all right? Because the messages that we hear, they really do shape our thinking about this topic. You have heard a lot about sex indirectly. I know this for a fact, not in ways that are trying to teach you about sex, but you just stumble upon it, and these things shape your thinking. We all get indirect lessons about sex portrayed to us or talked about in movies, in TV, in music. Maybe you've overheard conversations from parents or somebody older than you or even other students at school. What are those messages for you? I can give you some examples of the messages I heard when I was in high school. I know that when I was in high school, I saw on TV that it's normal and even celebrated to have lots of sexual partners. I heard in music that while a woman might say no at first to sex, if you keep at it, she's eventually going to say yes. I heard that, I learned that in movies, virgins are nerds. They're just not popular, not cool at all. I saw on TV that pornography is natural and even sometimes healthy for a person. Those are just a few of the indirect messages that I experienced as a teenager. And I've come to learn in my life growing up that those messages are all false. Next, we also hear messages directly from people who are trying to teach us, like right now I'm trying to teach you directly, or your parents might have taught you, or the school system that you're part of might have tried to teach you. Anybody have direct lessons about sex before? How many of you have your parents talk to you? They've had the talk about sex with you? My mom had the talk with me when I was in 8th grade, a little too late in my opinion, and she showed us this cartoon book called Where Did I Come From? It wasn't the best sex education, but she tried. I also went to a Christian school, which at the time, at least, did not give any kind of formal sex education for any of us students there. So growing up in my life, I didn't have caring adults in my life, besides my mom, who tried a little bit, to really take the time to help me understand issues related to sex. I was really dependent and just going off of what I heard indirectly from all those other sources that I just talked about. And by now in high school, I'm sure you've had plenty of messages told you directly and indirectly about sex. Some of those messages you can accept as true and good for you. And some of those messages that you've heard, I hope that you can also understand that you should reject as false. What I did leading up to the series is I wanted to try to think about and explore what I consider to be some of the messages that you as teenagers are hearing today when it comes to the topic of sex. I think that there's specific messages about sex that you get fairly regularly that are unhealthy and just plain wrong. And now, naturally, I can't go through all of them, but I pulled together just a few that I want to talk about today. What I want to do as I start off this series is compare the messages that you've heard or are hearing about sex and what God wants you to hear about sex. So let's get into this. Here's the first message that I think you may constantly be hearing about sex. You deserve sexual fulfillment. Now, this is a big one. Our culture today really pushes forward a message of entitlement when it comes to sex. You deserve to have sex. You have the right to have sex whenever, however, with whoever you want. And if anybody disagrees with your sexual choices, that person is prideful, prudent, hateful, closed-minded, you name the word. We're going to get into this more a little bit next week, but for now, just let me tell you, this is not a biblical value. It's not a healthy view of sex. The thought process of entitlement in relation to sex really leads to objectification, coercion, manipulation, sex trafficking, and really a lot more unhealthy sexual practices. When we believe that sex is something that we deserve, that we're entitled to, that we have the right to, it changes sex from a mutual act to a selfish act. It changes the opposite sex from a person into an object of sexual gratification. It changes sex from something given to something taken. It changes sex from something free to something that a lot of people end up paying for. And I know you may not want to hear this, but God's view of sex is not that you deserve it. God created sex to be a sacred act to be enjoyed within a certain context. And it's not something that we deserve. It's something created by God to have certain boundaries around it for our health, for our safety, for our enjoyment, and for love. And it's been that way since the very beginning. Now, in the book of Genesis, the very first book of the Bible, God creates man and woman. God brings woman to the man, the first interaction between man and woman in the Bible. And this is what the Bible says happens. The man says, "At last, this one is bone from my bones and flesh from my flesh. She will be called woman because she was taken from man." This explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one. Now, from God's perspective, sex is a beautiful thing. It was created for one man and one woman to be enjoyed in the context of marriage, to unify them, to bring them together. It's a gift to that married couples throughout time have enjoyed in God's blessing. Now, this isn't something that we're entitled to, something that we can or should, from God's perspective, do whenever, however, with whoever we want. It's supposed to be in the context of marriage. And this leads us to another unhealthy message that we hear about sex, which is, I need sex, and it's unhealthy to suppress my sexual desire. Now, I've heard teenagers, even adults, say this. Isn't it unhealthy to abstain from sex? Don't we all need sex to survive? And the answer is no, you don't. According to healthline.com, which is not a Christian source, by the way, there's nothing wrong with not having sex. And a quote I liked from this article that I read, it said, "Nothing will break or get old just because you aren't having sex." There's a 2018 study from the National Library of Medicine, and this shows that people abstaining from sex are unlikely to see any negative physical side effects. And interestingly, the study also showed that sexless Americans that are abstaining from sex, reported very similar amounts of happiness levels as their sexually active counterparts. And this message can also be taken in another direction as well when we hear this. It can go from our physical health and well-being, the concerns about that, to concerns about relational health. Some people think, I need to have sex with someone to see if we're compatible for a relationship. Now, I can see why people think that, but it's this thought, this reasoning, this message that you might have heard is actually not supported by research. In fact, the exact opposite is true. According to the Journal of Marriage and Family, both living together, cohabitating before marriage, and having sex early on in a relationship contributed actually to a poor quality relationship among the couples studied. Researchers also found that those who wait to have sex until marriage compared to those who don't, 20% of these couples that were studied reported significantly higher relationship satisfaction, 12% exhibited better communication patterns, 22% reported less consideration for divorce, and couples who waited until sex to have marriage were actually 15% more likely to have reported better sexual quality. So what God tells us in the Bible, when he created man and woman to enjoy sex in the context of a married relationship, the research supports that. Don't believe the false messages that you hear. You don't need sex physically. You don't need to have sex to make your relationship better. You don't need to have sex to see if you're compatible with someone. If you're a Christian, what you need to do is trust that the guidance and direction that God gives when it comes to sex is what's best for you, is what's true. Now let's move on to another unhealthy message we hear about sex. And check this one out. Sex isn't a big deal, right? Have you heard that before? It's just not that big a deal. I don't know why people get all worked up or talk about it or make it a big deal. Why does God have to be so restricting? Sex isn't a big deal. Just have sex and stop worrying about it. Now, guys and girls, I understand that this is the message that culture is sending your way, but really don't believe it because it's not true. Let me take this outside of the Bible for a minute, all right, to say how big of a deal sex is. The pornography industry revenue is somewhere between $6 to $15 billion a year. Sex is a big deal. There are over 40 million people being trafficked globally. 80% of those trafficked people are being trafficked for sexual reasons. Sex is a big deal. The Center for Disease Control says that estimates that nearly 20 million new STIs are occurring in our country every single year, and half of those are among people between ages of 15 and 24. Sex is a big deal. Sex unites another person, two people together in ways that nothing else does. Sex is a big deal. Now, here's one passage among many in the Bible where God clearly says just how big of a deal sex is. In 1 Corinthians 6, it says, "Run from sexual sin. No other sin so clearly affects the body as this one does. For sexual immorality is a sin against your own body. Don't you realize that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit who lives in you and was given to you by God? You do not belong to yourself, for God bought you with a high price. So honor God with your body." Your body is the temple of God. And this is not limited to sex. There's plenty of other ways that we are the temple of God, but this definitely includes sex. So it's important to see sex as a big deal, especially if you believe in God, especially if you are a Christian. Now, here's our last unhealthy message that we're going to talk about today. I know that we hear this message all the time. Christian sexual guidelines are impossible to uphold. Right? I hear this all the time. People say it's so stupid to encourage your kids to wait until marriage to have sex. It's just too difficult. There's no way. Nobody does that, right? I do believe that there really should be a good amount of sex education when it comes to the family, when it comes to the school system. That's not my job, and that's not where I'm going to be going right now to teach you those things. But what I know to be true is that God's way for sexuality, it is difficult. It is difficult. But it's not impossible. Many people believe it's impossible without even trying it. They have sexual urges. They want to have sex, and it's tough fighting those urges. So they say, why bother? I'm just going to give in anyway. If you're a Christian, what it comes down to is this. Do you believe what God says about sex is what's best for you? For instance, how many of you, there's a way that we can compare this to another topic, right? How many of you love sugar? I know I love sugar. Candy, ice cream, chocolate, so much sugar, right? It's just amazing. And if you look at the ingredients in food today, you will understand that most foods have sugar in them. They have added sugar in almost everything that we eat. It seems impossible to give up sugar, right? Now, let's say that you go to the doctor and she tells you, you have cancer. Hope this never happens. Let's say this happens, though, hypothetically. They're going to try several treatments. But the best way that you yourself can contribute to your health, to your healing, to your recovery is by changing your diet and cutting out sugar. Would you cut out sugar? If I would say absolutely, I would. I think you probably would too. It would be difficult. It would be extremely difficult, but you'd do it. So if you truly believe what God's message is about sex, that they're true, that they're best for you, that they're right, that it's what God wants for you, it may be difficult, but you're going to try your best to do that. And here's the truth. With God, all things are possible. Jesus has a word for us about this. When it comes to following God through difficult or challenging times, or following God's guidance in an area of your life where it's tough to go God's way versus culture or the world's way around us, Jesus says this in Matthew 19. He says, humanly speaking, it is impossible, but with God, everything is possible. It may seem like everyone else is having sex and no one is waiting until marriage, but that's not true either. According to a 2019 study, around about 54% of teenagers between the ages of 15 and 19 have had some kind of sexual experience. That is a lot. Then, it's a little bit more than a majority, but it's nowhere near everybody. 46% of people, of those teenagers, haven't had sex. That's a lot. That's a high number too. Now, if you're in that 54%, you've already had sex. Let me give you what the Bible says for you as well. 2 Corinthians 5:17 tells us, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old is gone, the new is here. Now, if you're listening to this today and you're thinking, it's too late for me. I've already had sex. I'm already sexually active. God's way, sure, it sounds great, but I'm past that. You're not. You're not. God says everybody who comes to him can become a new creation. Anyone who comes to him can be made new. Anyone who comes to him isn't held accountable for those sins. They're forgiven through Jesus Christ. Don't think that just because you've had sex or are currently sexually active that you can't have a relationship with God and you can't change what you're currently doing to live the way that God tells you about sex, to live out the messages he's telling you about sex. It will be a challenge, but you can do it through God's power in your life. So what messages have you heard or are even currently hearing about sex? Are they good messages? Are they true? Are they healthy for you? I want to challenge you today, whether you're Christian or not. I want you to explore more about what God says about sex. Read the Bible. See how beautiful God created sex to be. Join us for the rest of this series. Trust God that his direction that he gives you for sex is what's best for you. Let's pray to close. God, this is a topic that I know so many people are interested in and have so many questions about and think about so often. God, I pray, Lord, that as any student, really anybody listening today, is navigating what to believe about this topic based off of what they've heard and experienced, I pray that what you say from your word rings true. I pray that your direction and guidance on the topic of sex is what guides us, is what directs us, is what we turn to and trust as what's best for our lives. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks for joining us. See you again soon.